Try with me from the beginning one time. This is not one of mine, Nigunim, it's a friend of mine from Chicago wrote this beautiful niggun. I'm very connected to it. Beautiful name of this guy. Alright. Thank you everyone for schlepping out in such freezing weather, wet and cold weather. I know it's not simple, especially those of you who schlepped out from far away. It means a lot. It really means a lot. A night like tonight. Before we say anything, we're going to learn tonight for the Refuah Shlema of Miriam Chaya Bat Abigail Ora, Miriam Chaya bat Avigail Ora, and also for Ruth bat Esther Shoshana, for the Shlema Michal Moshe Ze'ev ben Yehudit, Natan Daniel ben Malka, and Binyamin Nachman Mordechai ben Ilana, and all the rest. Please insert the names to yourselves. And those of us who are learning online, you can mention the name also. And for the refuah shlema of many Jews that are suffering right now. Just an hour ago in Yerushalayim, two more Yidden were stabbed in the old city. It doesn't end. But I just wrote to my chevra that you know what the worst day in the world is? A day that has already become that's already like normal news. That's the real fear. That's the real scare. So last Monday night, we sat here and we had the highest shiur about Rivka. And it was so amazing. And I feel so disconnected from it because little did we know that 10 hours later, all our lives would be changed forever. And it's so incredible how what could happen in a week. And I've been in conversations with many of you, both those of us who live here and online, all over the world, in terms of reacting and what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. And there's no right or wrong thing. That's the thing here. There's no answer. There's absolutely no answer. But the wrong thing that you could do, there's one wrong thing you could do. And that's in the name of holiness, or in the name of whatever you think you need, to move on would be to ignore any aspect of what Hashem has put in front of our faces. So that's the bottom line right now, and I'm not going to talk more about this right now because we wouldn't stop talking about this right now. But any word of Torah we're saying tonight, and every conclusion we'll come to with tonight's learning, and every learning until Mashiach is coming, has got to be focused on the fact that Jewish blood cannot be spilled. Absolutely can't be spilled. And that Jewish blood has to stop being hefker. That's it. So we're sending a huge refuah shlema to the ptsuim, to those who are injured, and a huge refuah shlema to all the broken hearts. But we know that the refuah shlema, the complete healing, can't be done by band-aids. A complete healing has to become from something much bigger than anything we could have ever imagined. Well, that's exactly what tonight's shiur is about. Because we're going to be dealing with a figure tonight who, well, we'll see based on a midrash who this person is, or begin to taste who this person is, based on an incredible midrash from Eicha, a lot of midrashim tonight. But as I'm talking right now, I'm getting the chills because we're going to be speaking about someone who's buried 10 minutes from here. And that's Mama Rachel Imenu. And that's just incredible that we could be sitting here learning Torah, learning the Parsha, and we're speaking about someone who's buried behind us. Mamash behind us. It's just crazy. It's our friend Jerry's like second home. Jerry Latinik is like there every single day. Like Makever Rachel, that's his place. It's there that's this place. Everyone.
He goes every day.
I don't know, he goes every day, but whenever I talk to him, he's like, I was just in Kever Rachel. I'm like, you were just there yesterday. He's like, yeah, I know, but just here today. That's his place. Kever Rachel is like completely his place, and it's mamish right here. You know? Yeah. So like, one of my discussions I've been having with a dear friend in Chutz La'aretz about the necessity for Yidden to come and join us here, which I still can't understand why there'd be any sense of judgment if you tell someone, I really want you to be surrounded by utmost love, which is what we mean when we say to join us here. But one of the things that you can't explain to them is like, you can't explain to someone who's not married yet what it's like to be married. As close as you could come to it It's until you're in it, you don't understand it. So it's the same thing in terms of feeling godliness of Eretz Yisrael, and feeling this hitkashrut, this eternal connection with Am Yisrael through being in Eretz Yisrael is not something that any of us can explain. You can't explain it. Sometimes it does it a disjustice when you attempt to explain it. So, how could I explain to someone that right now we're sitting here, we're about to start learning about Rachel Imeinu, and the whole time in our minds and our hearts, she's buried right behind us. Like, that's crazy. And it gives this learning infinite more chiyut, livelihood. So in any event, tonight we're going right there. And tonight, I can barely feel the light of Sukkot anymore. I forgot that there was Sukkot this year. Especially after this last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Wow, really. And Sukkot was so incredible when I stopped and forced myself to remember what it was like, what Sukkot was like. So I remember that Sukkot really was tremendous this last year. Probably the most special Sukkot we ever had. And yet I don't feel an ounce of it. Consciously, subconsciously, what do I know what I'm feeling? Consciously, I don't feel it at all. And what am I doing? What are we doing? It's Kislev. We're running to the menorah. We're like, it can't come fast enough. The light that the menorah brings into our lives. Like jumping to Hanukkah. So Baruch Hashem, we already have a little clue as like why it's okay to jump to Hanukkah. If you go to Rishon in our Parshat, the first few psukim in Parshat Vayetze, so it says that when Yaakov Avinu woke up from the dream, he took the Evan, he took the rock, the main rock that he slept on, and he said he made it into a matzeva, into a monument, and then it says, Vayitzok shemen al rosha, and he poured oil on its head. Imam started lighting it like a menorah. He took oil, he took shemen, Vayitzok shemen al rosha, Shalom Aleichem guys. Imam poured oil on top of this rock. By the way, we see Hanukkah being hinted in many, many different stories in the Torah. Hanukkah keeps on showing up all the time. But to see it in our Parsha, and to see it, we see how badly we need it, and to see it show up in Rishon is a very, very, very special thing. So Yaakov Avinu waking up from the dream, Yaakov Avinu, that dream took place in Har Habayit. Yaakov Avinu resembles the third temple. Yaakov Avinu wakes up and he says, God is here, and I didn't know. All the places in life. We have to wake up and realize Hashem was right here. He was just waiting for me to become a partner with Him. And just take oil and pour it on there and light your own menorah. And don't wait till the 25th of Kislev. It's already the 3rd of Kislev tonight. Just do it right now. So, what we're going to discuss tonight is a little bit of a continuation of last week. And just to refresh our hearts because of how much has happened in the last week, it's a shock that any of us could, even have a cheshek to learn right now. Last week we were learning about Rivka. We were talking about how all the avot and imahot, but mainly the avot, they're known for a certain midah which personifies them. For instance, Avraham is chesed, Yitzchak is gvura, and Yaakov is midah is emes, right? So we think that means that all their stories about them in the Tanakh are going to show us how much they perfected that midah. When in truth, the exact opposite happens. They become themselves, and they perfect their midas when they learn how to shift to a different midah. Not that they have a trait in them, a certain midah, and they go with it all the way, but rather that they learn how to shift and tune in to the midah that seems opposing to that. And like we said last week, Avram's midah is chesed. Putting your son on the Akedah is not exactly a midah of chesed, right? Yitzchak is gvura, strength, fire. Loving your son who's a rasha is not exactly the midah of gvura. Yaakov's midah is emes, truth. Deceiving your father to get a bracha is not exactly the midah of emes. And yet we see which each of the avot that they only really became themselves when they saw and felt the need to actually go against their nature and go above and beyond their nature. And we saw this mahalach take place specifically by, I keep on getting mixed up with Rivka and Rachel for some reason, with Rivka, thank you. We saw this exactly with Rivka. Rivka, who's all humbled and in awe from Yitzchak her whole life, doesn't say a word, is completely blown out by the fact that she was chosen to be the mother of the Jewish people, and she's so quiet. And from the moment she sees her husband, she falls off the donkey, and all the things was it donkey or camel? Camel, of course it was a camel. She falls off the camel, and then what happens? She's quiet for 63 years carrying a certain secret, but she realizes that she herself, in order for her to be her, she has to stop being her. Isn't that a weird thing? In order for you to be you, you have to stop being you. And what does she do? She has to tune into this gvura world, which she has nothing to do with. I mean, the first thing we know about her is utmos chesed, coming and watering the camels and giving water to Eliezer and all the chesed, and that's how he knows she's the mother of Am Yisrael because of her chesed. And yet, in order for her to be her, she needs to now help Yaakov deceive her husband, get the bracha, and then come to Yitzchak and scream and say, I have enough of my life. I don't want to live anymore. If we keep our son here, Yaakov here, in order to find the shidduch here, let's send him away to where I came from, because there's someone there. And we see that's when she, mamish, became her, by going against her nature. And we're going to see how Yaakov Avinu is so attached to his mother when it comes to our Parshat, and really when it comes to the rest of his life. You know that saying, you marry your mother, right? Men marry their mother, somehow, sometimes? Mm-hmm. Not really? Not at all? Scary thought? Nervous laughing? Yeah. Is it true? I don't know. But it's very much shayach to what's going on in our Parsha. Very much shayach to them. And so there's a lot behind everything we just said right now. Every detail that the Torah tells us, and specifically what the Torah does not mention to us, which is always more fun to kind of pick at and try to understand, why doesn't the Torah tell us that? Why is it dafka not mentioning something? And that's like when you see the Torah pulling out its hand to you while you're learning and say, now it's your turn to share. That's what I always feel. When the Torah leaves something out, so it's not like saying, okay, it's irrelevant. The details here are relevant. Not true. It's saying, okay, now I want you, today, 2014, Tafshin Ayin, now it's your turn to become a Parshan, a Mefarish. Now you join this party of the list of all the tzaddikim that are, beneath over here, on the sides of the script of the text. Come, we need you. We don't need you to be a robot that just reads what everyone says. Learn what everyone says, but their neshamas are waiting for you to speak up as well. So there's a lot behind all these details. I don't know how much, as it is when this shiurim, we could prepare, and we usually, just so you should know, we usually maybe cover like 60% of what we think we're going to be learning here tonight. So, and I know that's what's meant to be, just like I know, like at my concerts, I know that I could plan the whole set list. I don't really, but I could if I wanted to. And then I stopped planning these set lists when I saw how relevant my ratzon to play was in front of what the crowd was feeling at the moment. So it's the same thing when it comes to the learning on a certain level, that I hope that when we leave here, that the shiur, except for last week, because our hearts have been stabbed open, together with the 5 people that were killed last week, but there's something very, very important about taking this shiur, any shiur, but specifically tonight, for me at least, and every day, you should know, we dafka do it on Monday nights and not on Thursday nights. It's not stam because it works out better for people. It's not, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Not dafka for me, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I always wanted that the shiur, that we start learning the parsha in the beginning of the week, so that we have the rest of the week to keep on going back to what we learned, adding on, davening over it, so that you come to Shabbos, you really have the parsha with you, or at least a certain concept of the parsha with you. Now usually we take one nekuda from the parsha, one point, and we say, let's just look deep into this one thing. Like in Parshas Bereshis, where you're going to start to learn the 7 days of, 6 days of creation and Shabbos in one shiur. So you take one aspect. What does it mean when God said, let us make man? Which is a pretty big concept. Or in other parashiyos like Noach, let's just talk about the dove. Or in Lech Lecha, let's just talk about Avram's relationship with Lot. Or take Parshat Vayera, let's just learn the Akedah. Well, tonight, it's going to be impossible to just take one thing. What we're going to be trying to doing is connecting last week. Taking that art of learning how to shift gears in order to become yourself. See how this chain, which the Avot and Imahot created, continues to flow through this parsha, and really throughout the rest of the parshiyas. But this parsha is important on many levels, but one of them I want to mention out loud, because you and I are very much directly connected to it. The Shvatim, the tribes, are born, most of them, are born in this parsha, right? And who we come from, Yehudi, is in this parsha. Hapam Odes Hashem. The tribes which set up you and I to figure out who we are, they're born in this Shabbos. This Shabbos is a very special time to, if you want to call it tshuva, you want to call it to rejuvenate it, call it rejuvenation, but it's a very special time to find yourself, to reconnect to your roots, to discover your roots, because the tribes are born in this parsha, and we're all known as Yehudim. It's not stam that this week in the Knesset they're trying to do all these laws about Yehudi. It's amazing. Huh? This Shabbos, Yehuda is born. The name Yehudi comes from Yehuda. Where it comes from, it's this Shabbos. So needless to say, there's a lot going on. Now, just open your hearts as wide as you can, and let's start flowing with this. There's an amazing midrash. It's a pretty scary midrash in Eicha Rabasi, in the midrash in Eicha. It's like, why would anyone want to learn the midrash in Eicha? Isn't it enough to just learn the psukim in Eicha? You want to learn a midrash on Eicha? The destruction itself isn't enough? You want to go deeper into how the midrash describes the pain and the affliction? So there's one many, but one that I saw, a very terrifying midrash, but that really makes me feel so beyond humbled that we live next to Rachel Imeinu. And again, as we're speaking, we're talking about what we're going to be learning about him based on a midrash from thousands of years ago. And she's buried right here. It says that during the time of the Churban, they saw God crying. Malachi Yashar Esav Hashem and Shamayim crying. Because obviously God was also crying over the Churban, which is a very far out concept. I once learned the pshat on that. When someone dies, even if they're sitting Shiva alone, what do you tell them? What's the sentence you tell them when you leave? Hamakom Yinachem Etchem, in plural. God shall console you, in plural, even if there's one person. Because the Ribbono Shel Olam is always crying as well, that one of his briyas, one of his creations, can't make the world more beautiful physically anymore. So on a certain level, now I don't understand this exactly, but the Ribbono Shel Olam is crying too, and he's crying his eyes out, and there's crazy descriptions of what God was doing during the Churban Abayis. And the angels tried to bring some type of image before God to stop this crying because they couldn't take it. And they tried to bring up the schuyot, the merits of our forefathers and our mothers, to try to stop this crying from taking place. And they brought before God the schus of Avram Avinu, who took his son and put him on a kedah and said, for his sake, can you stop this destruction? Look what it's doing to you, God. And that didn't work. And then they said, well, his son, maybe the schus of his son, who was willing to be shechted, Maybe him, for his sake. No. And so too and so forth they went with each of the avot and imaot. And obviously the one who causes the greatest change is our mother Rachel. When her name is brought up before the throne, something stops and something changes. And we all know what the Navi says. God says to Rachel, Min'i kolech mi bechi ve'enayich min dima ki yesh sachar lifulasech v'shavu banim ligvulam. He says, Rachel, you don't have to cry before me. You alone, your existence, and what you did and what you didn't do while you're alive, that's going to bring the great day to come. That's going to bring Am Yisrael back home. Getting very personal here on Monday nights. Those of you who are here for the first time, you know that it's, in the beginning it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but afterwards everyone feels fine. All my conversations this last week with friends in Chutz Laretz were all about, you want an answer? There is no answer that I could give you right now on the level of this will stop Jewish blood from being spilled. But the notion of coming back home, it's not something that I or any of my friends made up. And Rachel Imenu is the one to remind us in a very, very specific way how Veshavu Banim Ligvulam, when children come back home, it makes their parents stop crying. The Gemara says, in what way is God lonesome for us? In what way? What is the Churban? What is the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and exile like? It's like children, when they grow up, they were told once to leave the table because they acted not nice, leave the Shabbos table, and they never come back. Oy lo lebanim shegalu mishulchan avim. So the Gemara says. How scary is it when children leave their parents' Shabbos table? I think we spoke about this a few years ago. So if it's such a painful thing when children leave their parents' Shabbos table and don't come back, how heilig is it? How holy is it when children actually return back to their parents' Shabbos table? How much more simcha is that? Well, Rachel is the one who brings children back to the Shabbos table, which stops the tears of the parents. What did she do? Or what didn't she do? That she's the one who brings to such an end of such pain and such destruction. What is it about her? So when we start off in our Parsha, the first time Yaakov sees Rachel, so the Torah is very clear when it uses a phrase, an extra wording each time you have to say, the Torah really wants us to know who this person's from. So the first pasuk when Yaakov sees Rachel, the Torah mentions 3 times, Bat Lavan Achi Imo. She's the daughter of Lavan, and who's Lavan? The brother of his mother. Really, Rachel was his first cousin, right? The Torah says it 3 times in the first pasuk, saying this person Yaakov sees is the daughter of his uncle, the daughter of his mother's brother. 3 times. It could have just said that once. Maybe didn't even have to say it at all. But let's say I had to say it once. The Torah is telling us 3 times when it first brings Rachel onto the scene, the Torah is telling us something's going on here. And what's going on here? Parshat, very Parshat. Remember I said before that you marry your mother, right? The Torah is letting us know that Yaakov sees his Ima when he sees Rachel. Yaakov and Rachel's love story is the most heartbreaking love story in the Tanakh. Yitzchak and Rivka is the most romantic scene, where she comes off that camel, and they go out into the wind, brings her into the tent, and the Torah says, and they loved each other, and she consoled him. Here it's not exactly that. Yaakov sees her, and he kisses her, and he starts crying. It is so deep. That moment is so deep. But who does he see? He mamish sees an image of his mother. And the Torah tells us, Bat Lavan Achi Imo. He's seeing resemblance of his mother in this woman. And that's how the story of Yaakov and Rachel, and really from now until the rest of at least the next 2 or 3 parshas, this is the headquarters of the whole thing. Yaakov meeting Rachel for the first time. So when he sees Rachel, so he also knows, while this is happening, that his uncle Lavan is a trickster. He's a ramai, he's a cheat. And therefore he goes into great specific detail when he wants to marry Rachel, and he says, I forgot the wording exactly, but he says, Berachel bitcha haktana. Like he goes into detail saying, I want to marry your daughter, Rachel, the smaller one. Meaning because he knows he has to be very, 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 very exact. What ends up happening to that whole balagan? What ends up happening to that shidduch?
Didn't make a difference.
In the morning it's Leah. What do we know about Yaakov's reaction versus what we don't know? Who did he get mad at? Lavan. Something weird here. Who didn't he seem to be getting mad at? Rachel or Leah. Rachel or Leah. But the Midrash, so we don't know exactly yet what's going on. But we know one thing from the Midrash. The Midrash talks about that morning. And there was a discussion between Yaakov and Leah. And what was the discussion? Yaakov says, I don't understand something. All night long, we had the simanim, and you said it's I am that person, but really, you were tricking me the whole time as well. How could you have done this to me the whole night? And she's the mirror into Yaakov, the Midrash says. Why? Because what does she say back to him? She says, are you kidding me? Don't you remember what happened last week? Last Parsha? Didn't someone ask you, who are you, who are you, who are you? And you said, Anochi Esav b'chornecha. What are you talking about? This is exactly what happened last week. What is Yaakov going to say to that? No, that was different, I'm sorry. What's Yaakov going to do with that? And this Midrash is like, the Midrash continues and says, everyone knows that Rachel was so beautiful. And we're really, at the end, we're going to tie this all into Rachel's beauty. And what do we know about Leah? What does the Torah describe to us about Leah? Ve'enei Leah rakot rachot. That Leah's eyes were very soft. And everyone knows why were they so soft. Because she was crying all the time. Because she knew that she was destined to marry Esav. And the Midrash says she cried so much until her eyelashes actually fell out. And she lost some level of beauty. Bama, she cried it out so much that she literally changed, her physical form changed, crying, thinking about such a horrible thing for her. But it didn't start off being horrible. You see, this couple, we have to keep things in context. Yaakov and Esav, twins, are first cousins with Rachel and Leah, twins. The older, the Midrash says, Rashi brings it down, was going to marry the older, and the younger was going to marry the younger. Yaakov was destined to marry Rachel. Leah was destined to marry Esav. They kept tabs on each other. Somehow. No idea how mail worked back then. But they knew that they were going to be marrying each other. Now it's not just psha. I mean, if you knew you were going to marry Ahmadinejad, you wouldn't be crying your whole life. However, it didn't begin like that. And this is important right now. Esav didn't begin. It wasn't so clear from the beginning that Esav was who he was. That happened a little bit later in life. Esav was destined to do great things in Am Yisrael, and on the other hand, Yaakov was destined to do great things for Am Yisrael. Together, they were supposed to build something so monumental for Am Yisrael. So too, their zivug, their shidduch. Each was supposed to complement each other. There's many different ways of explaining this. I learned this from, I forget her name, I learned from her last week, this great Rebbitzin, I forget her name, I'll get it next time. And she brought down this beautiful teaching, I believe it's from Reb Meir Goldvicht, Rabbi Goldvicht. And, Yaakov and Esav were really supposed to be the ones to build Am Yisrael together. At the end of the day, how could you say that Esav was born in Russia? He comes from Yitzchak and Rivka. How could you just say he's just born in Russia? So Rav Goldvich said that everything that Esav was supposed to do was that he was supposed to mekadesh the chomer. He was supposed to sanctify the material. What's called avodat chutz. He was supposed to do avodah of the outside and then elevate that and show how you could be in the world and elevate that and make it holy, sanctify it. Ish tzayid, out there hunting. Yaakov, what is he supposed to do? Yaakov is supposed to do something else. Yaakov is supposed to be learning and show how the learning can then be taken to the street to other people as well. One was supposed to work from inside out, and one was supposed to work from outside in. And that hasn't changed in Am Yisrael. We have the same thing today. You have people that are supposed to show the greatness of God by being holy and sitting indoors learning and then bringing it out. And then you're supposed to have people that are out there on the road showing how in the street, in the workplace, in the marketplace, on the battlefield, you could be an Eved Hashem, you could be a soldier of God, and elevate that aspect. That's what Leah was as well. She knew that was what she was destined to be with Esav. And Rachel knew that her thing was more Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim, like Yaakov. Inside out, as opposed to outside in. Now this is an amazing thing. Leah ends up finding out about who Esav turned out to be. And she could do one or two things. She could either start davening to change Esav and make him do tshuva, so she could end up marrying him, or she'd done something more clever. She waits to see how Esav's own parents are going to treat the whole situation. And see, I trust them. I trust my auntie R, my Aunt Rivka. I trust her to figure it out, what it's going to take, what I should be doing. And she waits, and she sees that they put the whole shleichus onto Yaakov. Yaakov now has to do both. Yaakov has to shift. Yaakov learned the Torah of shifting his nature from his mother, who also had to do both. When Yaakov does what he does and he takes those brachas, Leah knows, oh my God, I'm alone now in the world. Or it means that I have to do my tafkid also with Yaakov. He has to do both worlds of Avodas Hashem. He has to be the Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim, working from inside out, but he took on Esav's whole geschäft. He also now has to take on Esav and Yaakov together. But this is based on the Sfas Emes. Listen to this amazing Sfas Emes. It says that when Yaakov put on Esav's clothes, that was a conscious decision that he is taking on Esav's Avodas Hashem in the world as well. Because he sees that Esav's never going to do it. So when he said, Anochi Esav Bechorecha, I am Esav, your firstborn, he's saying, yeah, I'm also Esav, your firstborn. I got to do his work that he's not doing now as well. So Leah decides, she says, he took it on? No problem. I'm going there to be with him. That's what happened that fateful night. That's what happened when Leah was with Yaakov that night. Rav Ginsburg pointed out something incredible. How do we know that Yaakov took on a lot of Esav in him after that night? So remember the amazing thing when he starts leaving Eretz Yisrael? He stops and he's like, wait a second. I just passed by a place and he just, in the beginning he just keeps on walking, getting out of Eretz Yisrael. But then he passes by a place and he's like, wait a second. Bless you. I just passed by a place that I could sense that my father and grandfather, bless you, used to daven in. And I didn't feel like davening too? My God. He's really in me. He really is in me. So what does he do? He's like, okay, I'm not just Esav. I'm still Yaakov. And he goes back and he starts davening. But to Yaakov, it's clear. Life is different now. I'm both. I got to do both. That night with Leah and Yaakov, and that midrash that says that Leah says to Yaakov, who are you kidding? You became Esav as well. And I'm destined to be with Esav too. That night changed history forever. Changed the future forever. That fateful night has changed Am Yisrael forever. I do want to go into one small paragraph from Rabbi Shlomo tonight. I'm just going to read it out to myself. And I'll give you copies later just because we barely have any time. But did you ever feel that you're carrying both Yaakov and Esav in you? Did you ever have what's called some kind of inner complex of character? Where you can't fit, wait a second, am I holy or am I not holy? What is going on here? Am I like them or am I not like them? This past, a few months ago, I was doing a concert in a center, I don't know how to call this exactly, but it was in a Breslov therapy center. And I was like, okay, these people are really open, dealing with very deep psychological aspects of Rabbi Nachman. They can handle this. So I said, some of the weirdest days of my life is when I wake up in the morning, and by the end of the day, so many me's have showed up that I have no idea who's going to sleep at night. So I just say, whatever, let's see who wakes up in the morning. I try not to make sense of it at night, because I know someone else is going to wake up in the morning. There's the aspect of, you wake up in the morning, you say, this is me, and I'm going to be me no matter what happens to me today. That could work in a world that you're in control of. A world that you're not in control of, you're going to find a few different yous there in that day. Yaakov realizes that he's not in control of anything. This he realizes early on. Yaakov's not in control even at birth, right? In his mother's womb, he's not in control. But Yaakov Avinu, that fateful night, begins to understand that he's not even in control over his own zivug. Bless you. The first real decision a person makes in life. Real decision. It says, Kashin zivugin gekriyas yamsuf. Finding your zivug in this world is as hard as crossing the Red Sea. Rabbi Shlomo said, for thousands of years, for generations, our parents crossed the Red Sea for us. Why? Because my great-grandfather and your great-grandparents didn't exactly go out on shidduch dates in the Ramada and go in the lobby and see. And that's not how they found each other. Their father told them who was their zivug was when they were 12. So their parents crossed the Red Sea for them. Today's generation, it's about us crossing the Red Sea on our own. Unless, there's still certain places not like that, but for probably everybody in this room, it was like that. And for some more than others, right? Now, Yaakov Avinu, the first decision a person has to make, a mamish decision, like a real decision a person has to make in this world, is that zivug connection. And Yaakov finally says, you know what? Everything was just thrown my way, or I was told to do this, I had to run here. I'm finally going to choose. I'm finally going to be a Baal Bechira. I'm finally going to make a decision. My eyes met the love of my life. I knew it, and those Rashis are incredible, describing what Yaakov saw. Yaakov starts crying because he sees he's not going to be buried with her, meaning he's seeing his whole future. Talk about Hollywood. He sees everything. The good and the bad. He sees it all. And even that's taken away from him. Yaakov's midah is the midah of emes. Emes doesn't mean you are always who you are. It means that you try to find truth in all the emotions that pop up into you. And Yaakov Avinu does not have any rest. And for the next few parshas, you'll see he keeps on thinking he's done. And then something else comes up. Like in Parshas Vayeshev. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. Yaakov finally is sitting, dwelling in Eretz Canaan, where his father and grandfather dwelled. And then Rashi says, Bikesh Yaakov lishev b'shalva. Yaakov finally is asking, it's been a little bit nuts. Let me just sit and chill. My sons go at it. He keeps on shifting. He keeps on discovering a new emes of Yaakov in the moment. But Yaakov's not the one to change the great day. Yaakov's not bringing his children home. Rachel is. What did Rachel do? I'm just going to read for you in here. Now you can take these home afterwards. Rabbi Shlomo asked, who was this is amazing. This is in Evan Shlomo. This is absolutely amazing. Who was the first Jew who felt, God forbid, disconnected from Yiddishkeit? Sometimes it happens to you and I. We feel a little bit disconnected from Yiddishkeit, right? It only happens like once every 2 hours, but it happens, right? But who's the first person this ever happened to, right? The first Jew who felt disconnected from Yiddishkeit was our mother Rachel on the night that Yaakov married Leah. She didn't know that one day he'll marry her too. So on that night, she felt that she lost her connection to him. You know, that night that she gives over the simanim to her sister. You know, I saw somewhere, you know what the simanim were, by the way? I didn't even know, what do you think the simanim, these signs that she gave over to him, she gave over to her were? It's like a wild thing. She gave over to her Hafrashas Chala, Adlakas Neras, and Taras HaMishpacha. She gave her Kala classes. She gave her all the secrets that Leah needed to know in order to be a Jewish woman. The simanim, which a Jewish woman is those three things contain within it the whole essence of it, the kedusha of a Jewish woman. And those three things were given over to her that night. And Rachel, even like she sees that she has to give over to her sister. But she was praying while this was happening. Ribono shel Olam, please, I don't know how, I don't know when, but please somehow connect me again. So Rabbi Shlomo says sometimes we feel there's no way to reconnect to God. Sometimes we feel that what we're doing, even if it's the right thing, like Rachel did, wasn't enough. And Rabbi Shlomo says, but where does the strength that you and I today have to reconnect ourselves again? Rachel Imeinu was crying that night. Her tears that night, that fateful night, her tears, and not just her tears that night, but something that happens a little bit later on in the Parshat, is what is kept Am Yisrael feeling that no matter how low we are, how disconnected, how betrayed we feel, how lost we feel that our own sister is marrying our loved, like the whole thing. Which is, that whole scene of that your own sister is marrying the one that you love the most. And yet feeling that I'm not giving up, please reconnect me in a different way. I don't understand what's going on, but you must reconnect me. Those are the tears of V'shavu banim likvulam. Those are the tears that keep on bringing Jews back home. Those are the tears that brought Jews back to Israel after the 6 million. Those are the same tears that have been bringing Jews back to davening to God. The morning, the 7-8 hours after the massacre in Har Nof, they were davening Mincha Mariv in that room. The next morning there was a bris in that shul. Where does that come from? That's not normal. That's not nature. That's not your nature. That's shifting your nature. Something that Rachel did her whole life. That midah is what Yaakov saw. Remember we said that Yaakov saw and he saw his mother? What do you mean that he saw his mother? Is that he saw that Rachel would also have to be shifting all the time and doing very heavy things in order to really what? Save the busha of her own sister. Why didn't Rachel ever speak up afterwards? Because she couldn't fathom the thought of embarrassing her own sister, saying, look, he really doesn't love you. She never says that. The tzaddikim talk about that the real level of chesed shel emes, which is really what Zaka is known for, right? Why is Zaka called chesed shel emes? Why is Chevra Kadisha called chesed shel emes? Because it's chesed that the person that you're doing it for can never ever pay you back for it. So chesed shel emes is when you do chesed for somebody and you never tell them that you did it for them. Further, chesed shel emes is also when you do chesed for somebody, and you have every reason to snap back at them one day if they ever have any issues with you. Like let's say you once lent someone money, not lent, you gave them tzedakah, they never found out it's you. And then one day in a conversation you hear them talking about how cheap you are. What would you want to do to them at that moment, right? Well, does that happen in our Parsha? It sure does. A few psukim later in our Parsha, there's a very wacky story with the dudaim, the dandelions. Right? It's dandelions that Ruvain brought from the field. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mandrakes.
Sorry. Huh?
Yeah, there were dudaim, but I don't know what.
Dudaim, how do you say manda?
Mandrakes.
Whatever.
That's a word you read.
But
no.
Dudaim. Go to Ulpan and Dudaim, certain flowers. Now these flowers have some kind of a connection to fertility. Okay? It's not too deep, right? It's way too deep to get into now. I just have to read you the words of the Torah. What the words tell us and what the words don't tell us. To show us again how we started off tonight's learning. And this is such a beautiful thing about learning the Pshat. Vayelech Ruven b'mei ktsir achitim vayimtza dudaim basadeh. Ruven goes out, he finds these dudaim in the field, he brings them to his mother Leah. And what does Rachel say to Leah? And Rachel couldn't have kids, right? So what does Rachel say to Leah? Tnina li midudai bnech, please give me some of these dudaim that your son found in the field, because maybe these could help me finally become an imah. Vatomer la, what does Leah say to her? Hameat kachtech et ishi velakachat gam et dudaei bni. It's not enough that you took my husband. You also want to take the dudaim of my son? Meaning, what does she say? See, Rachel never reveals to Leah that really she's mamish, like we don't we're missing something. Rachel never reveals to Leah what she did for her. Leah always thought that Yaakov really was. This is another way of learning this amazing Parsha. Leah always thought that she really was the one that Yaakov wanted. You know why? Remember we said before that there was destined already that the older would marry the older and the younger would marry the younger? Okay, the parents knew that, the kids didn't know that. What did Leah know? Leah knew something weird. Leah knew that Yaakov was sending her love letters, the Midrash says. What does that mean? So there was always these messages being sent between these cousins all the time. This is the flip side of this whole Midrash. And what would Lavan the trickster be doing? Lavan would take the mail and he would give it to Leah instead of Rachel. So Leah actually thought till that morning, when Yaakov's shocked, that she was the one that was supposed to be with him because she thought he always wanted that. The simanim that Rachel gave to Leah weren't simanim of tricking him. They were simanim of, Rachel simply knew this is how a Jewish woman acts. But her whole life, she's silent. Even here, when Leah says to her, it's not enough you took my husband. What do you mean you took my husband? Rachel could say to her, are you kidding me? You took my husband. And I came on second. So she says, it's not enough that you took my husband, you also want to take my son's dudaim? So the Midrash says, Vayiskor Elokim et Rachel. God remembered Rachel. And whenever he remembers Rachel, that's enough to bring the great day that much closer. What did he remember? He remembered a person, bless you, wow, a lot of interesting things tonight. No, sneezing during learning is always a sign that it's right. It's happening. I don't know what that says on nights when no one's sneezing, but tonight. Rachel's quiet, not because she has nothing to say. She has plenty to say. But she'd rather talk to God and say, I know I have to keep on shifting. I know life doesn't go the way that I thought it would go. But I'm never, ever, ever going to stop the tefillah that I started that night that my sister married my zivug. Please show me how I could still reconnect to you after this tragedy in my life, my personal tragedy. I want you to think right now about Rachel that night that her sister was with her husband. Think of that pain. So there's so much over here that's going on, like from who Yaakov and Esav were into Yaakov taking on Esav's tafkid, into Hashem remembering her shtika. Remember, who else took on shtika in this world? Who else was very silent that we just learned about? Who did we just learn about though recently that was very silent? Rivka carries a secret for 63 years. You know what Yaakov saw? Shtika, silence, quiet. Do you know what Yaakov saw when he saw Rachel and he saw her and he started crying? He saw how hard it would be for them to make it in this world. He saw that they wouldn't even be buried together. But he also saw that he needs things to be the way they are. And I'm going to end on something very, very heavy. Not, but it shouldn't be a shock to any of us. Yesterday was our daughter's 5th birthday. And on many levels, it's one of the holiest days of our life because it's the day that this neshama made my wife and I parents. More than even just celebrating her birthday, it's almost like a selfish thing. I'm saying, wow, this is a day of really intense. You know, I birthdays were always intense for me. Even like when I was 18 and, you know, when I was 21, I pushed myself to do something wild, do something so out there, which was, I was living in LA, and my friends always said, you know, you got to, when you turn 21, you have to go to Vegas. Ma kesher, like, so I went there, that's a long story, and everything about that trip was so not what you do in Vegas, because it's not, I remember I won the jackpot, and I took them, I couldn't believe, I was so nervous that I was doing something wrong when I started hearing, you know, that I went with my friend Yehuda from the Solomon, we went together, and David, I looked at the money, I was like, I looked a few times to make sure no one, I thought someone was about to kill me for some reason. And I ran up to the room and I stayed there the rest of the trip. I didn't do it like that, you know. It's like, this is so bizarre, but whatever, I have such a bizarre life. I just, you know, it's just so weird. Never went back there again, that place is... But it did have 3 kosher restaurants then. Probably today has like 35 kosher restaurants because the fastest growing Jewish community in North America. Nachas. So, birthdays are always, even that one, it's always din, it's much more, I always felt personally very much din v'cheshbon, always. I really did. Always felt very much like, where are you? Where are you? And yesterday, you know, it hit me since Tiferet was born. It's like, wow, Shlomo, okay. Mamish, where are you? Really now, where are you? Where are you? Where is she is not for you. She's not your property. So it was like the clearest day of my life. She's a pikadon that you take precious care of in this world. She's not yours. It's not like, okay, how is she doing? Let's judge her. No. How are you taking care of this precious, precious piece of God? Remember this story? The first night that Rabbi Elimelech became a father, the Noam Elimelech of Lizhansk became a father. And the Hasidim found Rabbi Elimelech crying by the crib of his baby. And they could tell that it wasn't exactly tears of only joy. The Hasidim saw there was a lot of fear in those tears. So they asked him, they said, Rabbi, what are these tears? He says, don't you understand? God trusts me with the piece of Him, and I know there's no way in the world that I could treat it, this piece of God, the way a piece of God needs to be treated in this world. So I'm begging Mechila from the baby, its first day on earth, that as hard as I'm going to try to be a good father, I'll never come close to what it deserves. And yesterday, I've almost felt that all day long. But yesterday, something deeper happened. Each one of us in this world, we are here to do a tikkun. Because if we weren't here to do anything or fix anything, then we wouldn't be here. How do you look at your own child and see you're also going to have to go through wondering who you are and be okay with that? And that's what I thought about last night when I was saying Shema Yisrael with them. How do you let go and be okay with the fact that they're going to have to go through feeling like Yaakov, feeling like Esav? Because these stories in the Parshat are for us today. It's not for what happened once. How are you supposed to be that, look at your daughter and say, one day she might feel like Rachel, And she might be also like crying one night saying, look, I feel so rejected, but please one day you better reconnect me back. And that moment really is the closest moment I feel that a person has to trusting God. Bitachon. Because we're not in control of anything. Yaakov keeps on seeing that he's not in control. Rachel keeps on seeing she's not in control. Leah keeps on seeing she's not in control. That's what this Parsha is. We're not in control. We have to keep on shifting. We have to keep on figuring out our nature, then going against it, then going back. What a dance. What a dance. How do you keep on going like this? Is there anyone in this room or anyone learning with us online? I see there's such a big chevra here. Even the chevra that are online, you could tell me later, and the chevra that will learn with us later. Is there anyone here that never felt that they keep on dancing? They're mamish multiple personalities. Who am I? Am I into Yiddishkeit? Am I not? Do I really believe in God or don't I? Am I in love? Am I not in love? All these things all day long. If you don't let yourselves feel those questions, then the greatest moments of having an opportunity to trust God will slip by you. And you'll live your whole life without an opportunity to trust God. That would stink. That would mamish stink. All these things, these stories, the Torah could have started from the first mitzvah. Go back to the first Rashi of the Torah. The Torah could have started with the Chodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. The Torah should have maybe started with just giving the first mitzvah. This is what you do, this is what you don't do. Before we get involved with do's and don'ts, averas, mitzvahs, chiyas, it's the refinement of character is what this whole book is all about. It's the refinement of a journey is what this first book, Sefer, is all about. Some of us have to say Ani Anochi Esav Bechorecha in this world and take upon ourselves, like we saw that tonight, that Yaakov Mamish took upon himself. Someone else is not doing that job that I thought I'd never have to do. The halacha says, "B'makom she'ein ish, heya ish." When there's no person, take the job, you become that person and take it on. Excuse me. Many of us have to do that. It's mamish against our nature. I always tell my chevra here, I am naturally shy person. I'm a shy person. I am. I'm even saying it to you right now. And it'll always remain, and it's like at a certain point I stop driving myself crazy saying, well, if you are shy, and how do you, ma kesher to your life? That's exactly the point. Because I have to learn how to trust Hashem and go into this vulnerable state of mind. And if I don't ever go into that vulnerable place, I'll never, ever, ever have a chance to connect myself to bitachon. Not emunah, bitachon. Not just believing in God, a concept. Plugging yourself into bitachon. And we'll end with this. This is what, one time when I came to the Amshon of a Rebbe, I told this to the Chevra on Shabbos. And if there's one person who mamish looks like what, if you could imagine Yaakov Avinu, it's the Amshon of a Rebbe in Beit Vagan. And I went to him and I whispered to him in his ear that I was going through a very confusing time, that the journey didn't seem like it was refining me. It seemed like it was absolutely rejecting me from anything that I thought was good in life. He whispered back into my ear and he said, try to string yourself into the bitachon in the Ribbono Shel Olam. And I wasn't sure that I heard him, and the Hasidim and the Gabbai behind me wanted to smack me for saying, what? I said, what? Who talks like that? Well, a chutzpah de kohen talks like that when he really wants an answer, right? I said, what? And he said again, try to string yourself into the bitachon in the Ribbono Shel Olam. To string yourself into what? Into the bitachon. What are you stringing yourself in and out of? Bitachon. As an Am, we feel very rejected when in the house of worship during Shmona Esrei, 4 Jews are axed to death. That's not a feeling of come, you're my chosen people. That's a feeling of Rachel that night seeing her dreams be taken up by someone who the last person in the world you'd think would do that to her, could do that to her, that it would happen to her. Am Yisrael thinking about Yidden in a shul, the way that it happened is the last thing that we would think would resemble oneness on the journey. We have to do one thing. We have to try to string ourselves so deeply into bitachon and Ribbono Shel Olam, because the biggest fear that came out of last week was, how could I be intimate with you again, Ribbono Shel Olam? How could I really talk to you? How could I ever say Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha again? Because that was the tefillah that most of them were saying when they got killed. It was the end of Shmona Esrei. And Rebbetzin Heller's son-in-law even gave over yesterday in very detailed manner that he was also doing that bracha of Simsh, bring peace on us. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amecha. These stories that we have, the Alter Rebbe, when he said you have to live with the times, I never ever understood what he meant like I do now. When he says living with the times means living with the parshas that you're reading during these times. And Bezrat Hashem, please God, we will give each other right now koach to string ourselves into the bitachon Ribbono Shel Olam, as long as we don't forget for 1 second what happened. We don't forget for 1 second the pain of any Jew, ever, specifically now. And as long as we don't forget that 10 minutes from here is buried the woman who's crying, V'shavu banim likvulam, that it is time to come home. No matter what anyone tells you, it is time for all of us to come home physically, to come back home here. There's no questions. There never was, but now there definitely isn't. But also home. Yaakov had to go home. Everyone wanted to go home, but home resembled the dichotomy. Home means that I go there and I realize everything that was put on my plate, everything I went through home, at home, all the mixed messages and signals that I got during my life, the simanim that confused me, it was all part of enabling me and the opportunity to trust God. We talk always about emunah, so you have to believe that everything's good, but stringing yourself into the bitachon ends up requiring much less of forcing emunah into your life. Because you have to force emunah into your life when you don't feel that you're being taken care of. So right now is the time more than ever to string ourselves into bitachon.
Can you explain the stringing again?
I could explain it in my own life, but I can't explain it in yours, you know.
What did he say in Hebrew?
No, he didn't.
He said,
I asked him in English, and he told me this in English.
wow.
I always saw it as like weaving. You put a needle in the thread, it keeps on going in and out, but it's always going across the same lines. That line is the oneness of God in this world. But if you don't take the needle and go back inside and keep on going back inside, in and out, you'll put it in and just go say, wow, where am I going in life? He's like, no. Turn it back again. Oh, and turn it back again. Turn it back again. Inside out, inside out, inside out. The job of people, mamish, you're either working inside out or outside in. You keep on going back and forth. The bottom line is that no matter what I'm going through, there's room in dialogue with God. I'm so mad at you for doing what you did last week if I believe you take care of everything. And I'm also so in love with you because you gave me such children. That's stringing. Oh, it's usher to say those words. God's big enough. God's big enough to hear it all. He hears our hearts anyway. Who are we kidding? That's a little bit of stringing in my life. I don't know what it. I'm sure you got plenty of stringing as well. Let's just string each other tighter than ever and keep on moving forward. Thank you so much for coming, everyone, and we'll continue next week with Bezrat Hashem.